Final day of the 70th United Nations General Assembly debate is underway, where leaders meet at the UN headquarters to discuss developing solutions to global challenges such as peace, security, and sustainable development. In Guatemala, the transition process remains on hold. The outgoing government of President Yamatei has not yet responded to the president-elect's proposal. And in Niger, the ruling military junta stated that the timetable for the withdrawal of French troops must be set within a negotiated framework. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In an effort to restore trust and promote unity, the 70th United Nations General Assembly debate began its final session on Tuesday. The focus continues on developing solutions to global challenges such as peace, security, and sustainable development. After a week of intense days of debate and accountability, more than a few say that the real solutions seem complex even with clear priorities on the table, such as climate urgency, inequities in the financial system, and political fragmentation. The world needs greater global prevention, and the United Nations can help bridge geopolitical divides. The non-fulfillment of its pledge of funds for preventive action against climate change in the South, as well as the lifting of unilateral sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela, have been relevant issues put on the table. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cameroon, Lejo Mbela, stated this Tuesday before the UN General Assembly that growth is below what is needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Meeting existing official development assistance commitments is not enough to meet the financing needs of the 2030 Agenda.
Mr. President, so what can we
During the address by Stanley Kakubo, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Zambia at the 70th United Nations General Assembly, he emphasized that the threat of a nuclear war is an element that needs all attention and called on all nations to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons.
The threat of nuclear war is a matter that needs our full attention. We take this opportunity to reiterate our resolute stance against the proliferation of the nuclear weapons, and we advocate for a world free of threats. We urge all nations, and we mean all nations, to uphold their obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and to work to prevent the development and production of chemical weapons. Mr. President, we set our eyes on a world, we set our eyes on an agenda to set the world on a path of sustainability, of success for the next generation. We are hopeful that this summit, this year, all our voices will be heard.
During his address to the 70th United Nations General Assembly, the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Syria, Bassam Sabah, referred to the challenges the international community faces nowadays, as well as the impact of unilateral measures and economic blockade policies on developing nations.
Our world today is witnessing important transformations and an increase of serious challenges, foremost being the outbreak of devastating conflicts in many regions around the world, the continued occupation of some peoples of the world, the spread of the scourge of terrorism, declining rates of development, and a sharp rise in the rates of poverty and hunger, in addition to the catastrophic impacts of the unilateral coercive measures. That, in addition to the economic blockade policies and the negative repercussions of climate change and its related natural disasters.
The Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Syria also condemned the Western sanctions against sovereign nations, and he described as terrorism all forms of unilateral economic measures.
Syria calls for an end to the military action and exercises conducted by the United States on the Korean Peninsula, which lead to escalation of tension in this region. Syria also demands the lifting of all forms of unilateral coercive measures imposed by Western countries on the Russian Federation, Iran, Venezuela, Belarus, Nicaragua, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, and against my country, Syria. It considers them economic terrorism no less brutal or dangerous than armed terrorism, especially in terms of its catastrophic humanitarian effect on the targeted peoples.
Nicaragua's foreign minister stressed the importance of the 77 plus China group as a mechanism to break the chains of slavery in his address to the 78th session of the General Assembly.
The United Nations has just held a meeting of heads of state and government of the G77 plus China in Cuba, which reached agreements of fundamental importance for the world, agreements that must be taken on board and fulfilled so that, with a consciousness of freedom and of the brother and sisterhood of the human family, we can continue to break the chains of slavery and dependence, of submission and subordination, of servile obedience, which the selfish, ambitious and perfidious colonial imperial interest intends, even at this stage in history, to continue imposing on us.
Cuba's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno Rodriguez, shared on his social media X the security camera video of the moment the terrorist attack on the headquarters of the Cuban diplomatic mission in Washington. According to the head of the Cuban diplomacy, the video shows the moment when the terrorists arrived in front of the diplomatic headquarters, ignites the Molotov cocktails and throws them against the facade of the building. The Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs also indicated that the material was delivered to the U.S. authorities. Cuba received numerous expressions of support from both inside and outside the United States since the news of the terrorist attack went public. Denouncing the event, Rodriguez Barrilla informed that this is the second violent attack against the diplomatic headquarters in Washington. Russia has called on the United States to conduct a thorough investigation into the attack on the Cuban embassy in Washington on Sunday night. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Tuesday that Moscow condemned the attack on the Cuban diplomatic headquarters. She stressed the need for the perpetrators to be brought to justice so that such a serious act does not go unpunished. The spokeswoman hoped that the U.S. authorities would carry out a swift and thorough investigation. She recalled that this was not the first crime committed against the Cuban diplomatic mission in Washington. She also demanded that the receiving party guarantees the security of foreign diplomatic missions on its territory in accordance with international obligations. And China also condemned the terrorist attack on the Cuban embassy in the United States and urged Washington to ensure the safety of diplomatic personnel. The Asian Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin reiterated that Beijing opposes all forms of violent attacks on diplomatic missions and urged the host country to investigate the incident. Cuba has received countless expressions of support from the international community since the news broke that an individual threw 2 Molotov cocktails at the country's representation in Washington. According to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, as a receiving state, the United States has a special duty to safeguard the mission's premises from intrusion or harm and to refrain from disrupting the mission's peace or dignity by taking all necessary steps. The U.S. Screenwriters Union and Hollywood studios reached an agreement in principle that could end a month-long strike in the industry. A letter the union sent to its member states that a tentative agreement was reached, with significant achievements for writers in all sectors. The strike continues until the union authorizes a return to work, where protests have been suspended. Thousands of film and television scriptwriters walked off the job in early May in demand for better pay, higher prices for creating hit shows, and protection from artificial intelligence. Since then, they have periodically mobilized in front of studios such as Netflix and Disney, and in July, actors joined the strike, leaving Hollywood sets virtually empty A report by the Milken Institute cited by the Financial Times estimated in early September that the cost of the strike to Hollywood was about $5 billion US. Even if the screenwriters' strike ends, there are no reports of negotiations between the studios and the 160,000-strong actors union. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. Guatemala's transition process remains on hold. The government of President Alejandro Giammattei has not yet responded to the president-elect's proposal. Bernardo Arevalo suspended the transition process launched under the supervision of Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States. After advancing a few steps, the Special Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity, headed by Prosecutor Rafael Curruchiche, raided the headquarters and materials of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. And as a result, Arevalo proposed a new methodology for the transition that the administration of President Giammattei is still reviewing, despite his promise to make the process quick and transparent. On Monday, the Peace Commission of the Congress of Colombia, headed by Senators Ivan Cepeda and Omar Restrepo, arrived in the department of Antioquia to investigate serious cases reported in the area. The community of Cáceres, where they met with the parliamentarians, has been denouncing serious acts perpetrated by elements of the Gulf Clan since August 23rd. The Jesus Maria Valle Human Rights Corporation has been recording massacres and executions of social leaders by men who wear the insignia of the Gaitanista self-defense groups or the Gulf Clan. In this sense, they highlighted the massacre of the 6 people in the village of San Pablo in the municipality of Cáceres. And we stay in Colombia, where indigenous peoples continue to arrive in Bogota to join the March for Life to denounce the violence in their territories by armed groups. More than 14,000 indigenous people from more than 10 departments of the country are expected to arrive in the capital this Tuesday to demand an end to the assassination of social leaders, the protection of sacred lands, and the health of the territories. During the mobilization that will take place on September 27th, various sectors of society and mainly movements will participate. At the same time, it is expected that indigenous leaders will meet with President Gustavo Petro before returning to their territories at the end of the week. At least 8 people died and 2 were missing after a rain turned a mountain stream into a torrent of muddy floodwater that swept away villagers, authorities said on Monday. The bodies of some victims were reported to have been found several miles downstream from where they disappeared near Outland in the western state of Jalisco. 8 people are reported dead so far, and search efforts continue to locate 2 more people, the Jalisco Civil Protection Service said in a statement on Monday evening. Deforestation and a fire earlier this year caused significant damage to the wooded area and could have contributed to the flash flooding. Dozens of rescue workers were deployed in the area to search for the missing. Mexico is regularly hit by flooding and tropical storms. Scientists say that climate change is increasing the risk of heavy rain because warmer air holds more moisture. At least 6 people died and more than a dozen are still missing in the center of Guatemala's capital after the El Naranjo River overflowed its banks and swept away 6 houses in the Dios Es Fiel settlement located under a vehicular bridge. According to authorities, there are 2 minors among the dead. Hundreds of firefighters, police, military, neighbors, and volunteers are participating in the search for the missing. Although the tasks were suspended on Monday afternoon due to the rains and resumed this Tuesday, most of the houses in the area are built with zinc sheets. The river that overflowed carries much of the sewage from homes in the capital, and thousands of underprivileged inhabitants have erected buildings on the riverbanks, even though it is prohibited by the authorities. Populators have been forced to build their homes on ravine slopes, riverbanks, and flood zones in Guatemala, where 59% of the 17.7 million inhabitants live in poverty. We're going to take a final short break, but before we'd like to invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, where you can rewatch our broadcasting, special interviews, and special programming. So hit on that subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent event. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the south. On Tuesday, Armenian authorities said that at least 13,000 people from the breakaway Caucasus territory have arrived in the country in the past week. The territory had a population of 120,000 before Azerbaijan's blitzkrieg offensive on September 19th, which followed months of blocking supplies to the enclave. Azerbaijan pledged to allow rebels who laid their arms to flee to Armenia and promised to guarantee the rights of Armenians who remain in the enclave. But the authorities in Yerevan denounced plans for ethnic cleansing, and at the only land route out of Nagorno-Karabakh, the Lachin corridor, hundreds of vehicles were waiting to cross into Armenia. Armenia and Azerbaijan, two former Soviet republics, have fought two wars over Nagorno-Karabakh in the past 3 decades, between 1988 and 1994, and in 2020, last week's operation ended with 200 dead, according to Armenian separatists. The government and the Organization for the Liberation of Palestine on Tuesday welcomed the visit of the Saudi ambassador and consul of Jerusalem, Nayef al-Sudairi, to the occupied territories. The visit is considered a historic milestone for the development of fraternal relations between the two countries and the opening of joint cooperation in all fields. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry appreciated the support of Saudi Arabia under the leadership of the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin. This is the first time a senior Saudi official visited the occupied Palestinian territory since the appointment of al-Sudairi as non-resident ambassador to Palestine. Niger's National Council for the Safeguarding of the Homeland has reminded the French government that the timetable for the withdrawal of its troops must be set within a negotiated framework. They say this after realizing that President Emmanuel Macron would finally authorize the departure of their troops. The transitional Junta, currently governing Niger, had repeatedly called for the withdrawal, stressing that this is a historic moment and recognizing that the decision of Paris represents a new stage in the country's sovereignty. They informed France that they were taking note of the decision, hoping that the declaration would lead to official acts and a process of common agreement. The 5th World Coffee Conference is held at the Bengaluru Palace, Bengaluru, from September 25th to the 28th. Organized by the International Coffee Organization in collaboration with the Coffee Board of India and other host country entities, the conference, which attracts participants from over 80 countries, includes over 2,400 delegates, 117 speakers, 208 exhibitors, over 10,000 visitors, and over 300 business-to-business meetings. The board is actively supported by 16 coffee committees. Around 2,400 people, including growers, roasters, curators, exporters, traders, coffee shop chain owners, and retailers, attend the WCC. Among them, more than 300 foreign delegates from 60 countries.
While India continues to be a large producer of coffee and an exporter of almost $1 billion of coffee, I, for one, believe that we have miles to go. We have huge potential. We have a lot of work to do in our country in terms of expanding coffee plantations, expanding the taste of coffee into interiors, into other parts of the country, and also take our Indian coffee to many, many more destinations.
We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.